Hi, everybody. Welcome to Thursday's lecture. So now that we have finished reading Chapter 5 of the New Jim Crow, which, as you know, acts as kind of like a summary of the previous 4 chapters and how they engage in these nuanced areas of the war on drugs and the criminal justice system, how mass incarceration has, in effect, without necessarily being labeled as an explicit form of segregation, has, through implicit policies and actions, has contributed to this kind of continuation, right, of an implicit form of racism and segregation. And so we have been examining this through the nuances of the way police are trained, and how dominant ideologies kind of infiltrate that training. We've been looking at, the concepts of colorblind racism in laws that are created, and race-neutral language that still inculcates the ideas of this kind of racial caste system. We also now have been able to see the parallels between Jim Crow laws after emancipation and abolition, and and aspects of the war on drugs and the criminal justice system in particular. So now that we have that, we've been doing all of this kind of nuanced investigation of policies and processes. We come into the space where we're thinking about the implications of such information. What do we do with this information? And also, more critically, especially in cultural production, how do we somehow investigate how these different policies and structures have enabled the perceptions of people? So, we're reading The Dutchman by Leroy Jones, and it's a very short play. It's very simple. It's about 2 people in a subway, and it kind of works to summon all of this information that we've just been investigating, but looking at it through now how these things are embodied into the individual as a citizen, as someone who perceives. And so you want to look at the relationship of Lula and Clay in the play and ask yourself the question, how is all this information that we've been examining over the course of the quarter, how is it somehow collapsing into the scenario, the circumstance of these 2 individuals riding the train? What does it mean? Where do we see these scholarly ideas being manifested into a relatively mundane, yet, of course, because it's art, extraordinary situation? Pay close attention to ideas of power and presumption, because in Jones's play, there is a lot of the way that the meaning is made operates on ideas of presumption. And then, of course, there is the consideration of violence. Now, think about what we have read in Chapter 5 around this idea of presumptions of violence. And think about how that might relate to the circumstances of the play, and certainly in the tete-a-tete that exists between Lula and Clay. Read this play with all of that information and just see what happens to your way of realizing the characters and the dynamic between them. Also, of course, we're engaging in our small group conferences starting today, actually in a couple hours, and I look forward to seeing you all. Have fun with the rest of the week and have a wonderful weekend. And when we come back next week, we're going to be looking at a play called Baltimore by Kristen Greenridge, as well as finishing up the book, The New Jim Crow. Indeed, Chapter 6, as you're going to find out, kind of also goes into the same questions that I've asked earlier. What do we do with all this information now that we have it? And so hopefully that begins to generate our ideas for our final paper project, which is going to be anything of your choice inspired by the questions kind of surrounding, okay, what do we do with this information? And we will talk about that more next week and begin to wrap up our quarter. Imagine this, we only have about 18 days left. So let's get hot. Thanks for participating and responding in your discussion questions. They have been incredibly robust as of late, and I'm really impressed with the work that you all have done, especially in light of our strange circumstances. Have a great weekend. Try to enjoy it as much as you can. I'll see you on Tuesday, or of course in our small group conferences later this week.